The claim now circulating through royal channels is built around one image: Prince William walking into a private palace room with a folder nobody wanted opened. According to the story, the papers inside did not remove Queen Camilla's title, strip away her public dignity, or challenge her position beside King Charles today. They did something more threatening. They allegedly placed a permanent boundary around what her title could mean after Charles's reign, and they placed William in the position of delivering that boundary directly to his father. That is what gives the story its conflict. A title can remain untouched while its future influence is quietly reduced. Camilla could still attend ceremonies, appear beside Charles, receive guests, and be addressed as queen. But the supposed instruction allegedly stated that her position must never be used to influence the shape of William's monarchy or the future role of Catherine. In other words, she could remain central to the present, but would have no authority over what came next. For Charles, that would be more painful than an open rejection. He has spent decades defending Camilla against public hostility, family memory, and the shadow of Diana. He waited through years when even the language surrounding her future title remained uncertain. He finally saw her crowned beside him. If a document from Queen Elizabeth then declared that acceptance had limits, Charles would not simply be reading a rule. He would be reading a judgment on how far his own devotion could reach. For Camilla, the wound would be different. She has survived criticism that would have destroyed a less disciplined public figure. She gradually moved from tolerated presence to working royal, from Duchess of Cornwall to Queen. But the viral claim suggests that the late monarch separated dignity from power. Camilla could be honored, but contained. She could stand beside the king, but never shape the future queen's position. She could belong to Charles's reign without gaining any claim over William's. William's role makes the story even more explosive. If he delivers the instruction, he risks appearing to confront his father before becoming king. If he hides it, he risks allowing uncertainty to grow around Catherine's future. If he speaks gently, viewers may see calculation. If he speaks firmly, they may see revenge. The folder, therefore, becomes more than a document. It becomes a test of whether William is still acting as a son or has already begun acting as the guardian of the next reign. Catherine is drawn into the conflict without needing to say a word. The alleged instruction is presented as protection for her future position. She did not request it publicly. She did not challenge Camilla. Yet the story places her at the center of the dispute because any limit on Camilla's future influence would automatically strengthen Catherine's eventual role. That creates an uncomfortable question. Can Catherine benefit from a boundary without appearing responsible for the pain it causes? The viral version understands exactly how to intensify that tension. William supposedly places the folder on the table, but does not immediately hand it to Charles. Camilla remains still, trying to understand whether the papers are about ceremony or control. Charles looks at his son and realizes the conversation is no longer about one title. It is about who has the right to define the crown after him. The silence becomes more important than any dialogue because each person is imagined to be calculating what the instruction will cost. Then comes the first twist. The story claims Queen Elizabeth did not create the boundary because she hated Camilla. She created it because she feared blurred authority during the transition between reigns. That distinction makes the allegation harder to dismiss emotionally. Hatred could be challenged as personal. Protection sounds constitutional. Rejection looks cruel. A boundary can be defended as responsible, even when it causes the same pain. According to the dramatic account, the key word was ceremonial. Camilla's title would carry honor, visibility, and respect, but it would not allow her to guide appointments, control access, influence succession symbolism, or shape the future household around William and Catherine. The word sounds harmless until its consequences are considered. Ceremony is what the public sees. Influence is what happens in private. The supposed document allegedly allowed one while blocking the other. Charles would understand that difference immediately. His wife could be queen in photographs, state banquets, and official programs, yet still be excluded from decisions touching the next reign. To him, that might feel like the institution accepting Camilla's service while refusing to trust her judgment. To William, it might feel like the only way to prevent the current household from reaching beyond its proper time. Camilla's strongest argument would be that she never asked to control William's monarchy. She could say that years of service should not be transformed into evidence of ambition. She could remind Charles that every expansion of her household, every office, and every advisor existed because the current king required support. A future restriction based on what she might do could feel like punishment for a threat that had never been proved. William's strongest answer would be that succession cannot depend on trust alone. A monarchy survives through boundaries that remain clear even when relationships are warm. The future queen must not enter her role surrounded by competing interpretations of who holds influence. If Catherine's position is protected only by goodwill, then every staffing decision, title, ceremonial phrase, and household arrangement could become a new conflict. Anne's possible reaction adds another layer. She is not the main character in this version, but her reputation gives weight to the institutional side of the argument. Anne could sympathize with Charles while still believing William had no choice. She could understand Camilla's humiliation while insisting that no consort, present or future, should blur the line between supporting a sovereign and shaping the reign that follows. Her silence would not prove support, but the story would use it that way. The conflict would then move from family emotion into palace practice. Camilla might discover that certain briefings involving future precedent had become smaller. Language and ceremonial programs could be tightened. William's office might request more control whenever an event pointed toward the next reign. Catherine's future role could be described with greater precision. Nothing dramatic enough for an official announcement, but enough for Camilla to feel that a wall had begun rising around her title. Charles would see those changes as an administrative punishment disguised as clarification. A revised schedule is easy to defend. A changed line in a program can be called routine. A smaller meeting can be explained as efficiency. But together they could send one message: Camilla remains respected only within the boundaries of Charles's reign. That is the pressure point the story keeps delaying. The audience is not simply waiting to hear what the document says. It is waiting to discover who will refuse it first. Will Charles place his marriage above the late Queen's instruction? Will William challenge his father openly? Will Camilla insist that respect without influence is another form of rejection? Will Catherine ask William to soften a protection she never requested? The alleged origin of the instruction deepens the mystery. The story points back to a private title consultation during Queen Elizabeth's reign. Camilla's advisors supposedly explored language that could bring her position closer to shared royal authority. Charles tried to reduce the tension, but one phrase allegedly alarmed the Queen. William noticed Elizabeth set down her pen, and the room changed. Whether that scene happened or not, it works because language matters inside monarchy. Titles affect precedence, access, staffing, public perception, and historical memory. Queen can describe the sovereign's wife, but it does not give her the sovereign's constitutional authority. Any phrase suggesting shared command would naturally require careful handling. The viral story converts that ordinary constitutional distinction into the moment Elizabeth decided Camilla's future reach had to be limited. The second page in the supposed folder then becomes the threat hanging over the entire first half. It allegedly contains not just a warning, but an enforcement mechanism. William would not merely be revealing an opinion. He would be carrying instructions designed to protect Catherine's future position and prevent later reinterpretation. Charles would not be able to dismiss the papers as old anxiety. Camilla would not be able to rely on her husband quietly changing the language. That possibility creates the sharpest confrontation between Charles and William. Charles could argue that his mother's private concern should not become a weapon against the living queen. William could answer that ignoring it would make the next transition vulnerable. Charles could accuse his son of using Elizabeth's memory to increase his own control. William could accuse his father of allowing personal loyalty to influence institutional boundaries. Neither man would have to be entirely wrong. Charles would be defending the dignity of the woman who shares his reign. William would be defending the clarity of the monarchy he expects to inherit. The tragedy would come from the fact that protecting one appears to weaken the other. Camilla would face the cruelest emotional question. Was she being limited because of something she had actually done, or because the family still feared what her influence represented? If the document existed before the current reign, then the judgment would have been prepared before she had the opportunity to prove how she would behave as queen. She could see that as foresight or as distrust made permanent, Catherine could also feel trapped. A boundary written to protect her might damage her relationship with Charles and Camilla. Any future prominence could be interpreted as the result of a private victory. If she remained, silence could look like approval. If she showed sympathy, sympathy could be described as performance. The supposed protection would carry its own cost. The imagined confrontation would become even sharper if Charles tried to delay the instruction. A delay would protect Camilla for one more season, but it would also give William a reason to believe the current household was using time to weaken the boundary. Every new appointment, every ceremonial phrase, and every expansion of Camilla's office could then be interpreted as an attempt to create facts before the next reign began. Charles might call that ordinary support for the Queen. William might call it influence being made permanent. Camilla could respond by asking why Catherine needed protection from a woman who had never challenged her publicly. That question would force William to defend a threat that remained mostly theoretical. He could say the purpose of a boundary is to prevent a crisis before it appears. Camilla could answer that prevention without proof is simply distrust written in formal language. The conflict would no longer be about ambition. It would be about whether fear of a future problem justifies limiting someone in the present. Anne would then become the person both sides quietly watched. Charles could expect his sister to understand the cruelty of the restriction. Camilla could see Anne's silence as another family verdict. Yet Anne's real burden would be refusing to let sympathy become a reason to leave the next reign exposed to uncertainty. The more calmly she behaved, the colder the decision would appear. Catherine might privately urge William not to turn her future title into a weapon against Camilla. But William could argue that avoiding the issue would only make Catherine more vulnerable later. A future queen cannot enter a reign surrounded by questions about another queen's continuing influence. Catherine's reluctance would humanize the conflict, but it would not solve it. The protection could still be necessary, even if the person being protected wished it had never been written. The story therefore builds toward a choice no one can make cleanly. Charles can defend Camilla and appear to challenge succession. William can enforce the boundary and appear to punish his stepmother. Camilla can resist and appear ambitious. Catherine can remain silent and appear satisfied. Every available action carries a damaging interpretation, which is exactly why the alleged folder becomes such an effective, dramatic device. By this point, the viral story seems to have established a complete palace crisis. A late monarch's command, a son challenging his father, a queen discovering that her title has limits, a future queen protected without asking, a family divided between present loyalty and future duty. But the main detail that changes the entire story appears only after the conflict has already been built. No authenticated instruction has been produced publicly. No official palace statement has confirmed that Queen Elizabeth created a binding document limiting Camilla's title after Charles's reign. No identified solicitor, courtier, archivist, or constitutional authority has verified the alleged folder, the second page, the title consultation, the exact wording, or William's confrontation with Charles and Camilla. The source script provides private dialogue, gestures, pauses, office changes, and emotional reactions as though a witness recorded the room, but it does not establish how those details were obtained. The central event is therefore an unverified dramatic claim, not a confirmed royal decision. Queen Elizabeth's known public position also creates a major contradiction. In 2022, she publicly expressed her sincere wish that Camilla would be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king. That announcement was deliberate and historically important because it settled years of uncertainty surrounding Camilla's future title. A secret instruction designed to contain Camilla's role after Charles is not impossible in theory, but a claim so different in tone from the Queen's public endorsement requires strong evidence. None has been shown. The real constitutional structure already creates the separation the story dramatizes. The sovereign holds constitutional authority. A consort supports the sovereign, but does not share the crown's legal powers. Camilla can advise Charles privately because she is his wife, but private influence is not the same as independent royal command. The same will be true for Catherine when William becomes king. Her importance will be enormous, yet the constitutional authority will remain with him. That distinction also limits the idea of two queens competing across reigns. Once Charles's reign ends, Camilla would not remain the queen of an alternative court capable of directing William's monarchy. She could retain courtesy, experience, and public respect, but she could not constitutionally outrank the new king or displace Catherine as his consort. Any continuing role would exist because William's household and the government considered it appropriate, not because Camilla's current title survived unchanged. The more difficult questions would be personal rather than constitutional. Would William consult her on causes she has supported for years? Would she appear at major family ceremonies? Would her staff be reduced quickly or gradually? Would Catherine publicly include her to signal unity, or would the new reign create visible distance? Those choices could produce real emotion even though the formal hierarchy is already clear. The constitutional point is simpler than the viral story suggests. Camilla is queen because she is married to the king. She is not sovereign in her own right and is not in the line of succession. Her position is already tied to Charles's reign. When William becomes king, Catherine becomes queen, and Camilla's role changes automatically. No secret document is required to establish that basic transition. Camilla cannot constitutionally inherit Charles's authority, direct William's reign, or compete with Catherine's position as the new sovereign's consort. She may retain dignity, patronages, security, staff, and a public role depending on future decisions, but she would not become an alternative center of constitutional command. The boundary the story treats as a hidden revelation largely reflects the existing structure of monarchy. That does not eliminate the real conflict. It relocates it. The genuine question is what practical role Camilla will have after Charles. Will she continue selected public duties? Will her household remain independent? Will William support her charities? Where will she live? How visible will she be at state and family occasions? Those decisions could create tension because they involve money, security, residences, staff, memory, and the identity of the new reign. William may prefer a clearer and smaller monarchy. Catherine's role will naturally become central. Charles may want guarantees protecting Camilla's dignity. Camilla may fear that the transition will reduce decades of work to an uncomfortable footnote. Anne may encourage firm boundaries. None of those tensions requires the invented folder, but all of them explain why the folder story attracts attention. The claim also succeeds because it gives the late queen the final word in a conflict the public never considered fully resolved. Viewers who admire Elizabeth see her protecting continuity. Those loyal to Diana see William defending the future. Those sympathetic to Charles see a husband forced to choose the crown over love. Those critical of Camilla see acceptance ending exactly where authority begins. Reality is less satisfying because it provides no clean victory. Camilla remains queen during Charles's reign. William remains heir rather than sovereign. Catherine's future is constitutionally secure without a private battle. Elizabeth's public endorsement remains part of the historical record. The transition will happen eventually, but its practical arrangements have not been publicly settled through any document the audience has seen. Palace silence cannot prove the claim. The royal household does not answer every online allegation. If William and Camilla appear cordial, the story can call it performance. If Charles defends his wife, it can claim the document has divided the family. If Catherine says nothing, silence becomes satisfaction. A theory that treats every possible reaction as evidence cannot be properly tested. The safer questions are direct. Has the document been published or authenticated? No. Has the palace confirmed its wording? No. Has a credible constitutional expert explained how it would operate? No. Has William acknowledged delivering it? No. The story may reflect real anxieties about succession, but its detailed private scenes should not be treated as established events. There may be genuine private planning for Camilla's future. Responsible households prepare for transitions. Staff, residences, security, funding, patronages, and ceremonial roles would all require discussion. Charles may leave personal wishes. William may already have views. Camilla may have preferences of her own. But private planning is different from a late queen secretly drawing a permanent line through Camilla's future. The most powerful conflict, therefore, remains ahead, not inside the alleged folder. When William becomes king, he will have to balance respect for his father with the identity of his own reign. He will have to decide whether Camilla remains visible or steps back. Catherine will become the senior royal woman, and every appearance will be interpreted through history. Camilla will have to accept that the authority surrounding her title has moved elsewhere. Charles may find that transition emotionally painful, even if every arrangement is handled with dignity. The reign he built around Camilla's acceptance will end, and a new household will naturally take control. William may believe clarity is necessary. Charles may see clarity as coldness. Camilla may see ordinary constitutional change as the final confirmation that her acceptance was always temporary. That is enough conflict for a strong story without presenting invented private conversations as fact. Camilla's title is powerful now, but limited by time. Catherine's authority is delayed but expected. William must prepare without appearing impatient. Charles must protect his wife without trying to control the reign that follows. Elizabeth's legacy remains influential, but no verified secret instruction has been shown. The final verdict is clear. There is no credible public evidence that Queen Elizabeth left William a binding folder ordering him to contain Camilla's title or prevent her from influencing Catherine's future role. The monarchy's existing structure already ensures that Camilla's position changes when Charles's reign ends, and that Catherine becomes queen beside William. The allegation remains compelling because it transforms a predictable transition into a personal showdown. It gives William a document, Charles a betrayal, Camilla a boundary, Catherine protection, and Elizabeth one final command. But emotional precision is not documentary proof. The real royal drama will come when the future becomes the present. William will inherit the crown. Catherine will step into the role prepared for her. Camilla's public authority will change. Charles's wishes and Elizabeth's legacy may influence the decisions, but the new king will still have to make them. Share your verdict in the comments. Do you believe Queen Elizabeth may have left private guidance about Camilla's future role? Or is the secret folder story simply turning an ordinary succession reality into a palace war? And when William becomes king, should Camilla retain a visible royal role or step back completely for Catherine's reign? Subscribe to Palace Verdict Daily for more royal conflict palace decisions and careful analysis of the stories shaping the future of the crown.